Welcome to the Be Battle Ready podcast, where we take a deep dive into what it takes to be battle ready in your lifestyle so that you can go to war on your life and the marketplace and win.
All right, welcome to the Be Battle Ready podcast. Today I have on Carman Pirie. He's the CEO he's the co-founder of Kulu. Let me redo that.
It's Kula Partners.
Kula Partners.
Yeah.
All right, welcome to the Be Battle Ready podcast. I'm on with Carman Pirie of Kulu Partners, the co-founder, an agency that helps B2B manufacturers that help their digital experience and transform how they engage buyers. So I'll let him do more justice and introduce himself and all that than I can, but welcome on the show.
Thanks for having me, Anthony. Good to be chatting with you. Yeah, I'd just say, look, I'm a co-founder of Kula Partners, and we're an agency focused on helping manufacturers transform their marketing and sales function to be, frankly, just more digitally enabled, if I had to just sum it up really quickly.
Yeah, awesome. Well, welcome. I mean, I appreciate you coming on. And, you were just telling me before we started about that your clients have a very small market, and the importance of, narrowing down and picking out the right tactics and strategies and stuff to actually go after them. Tell me a little more about that.
Yeah, I guess where we're picking up on that is it's a model that I think, or at least I think the flaw that I'm identifying is a flaw that could be leading other marketers down the wrong path beyond just the vertical that I work with, and so it may be helpful to your listeners, I guess. In that my clients, many of them have a limited universe that they can actually sell their products to. For instance, if you're a flexible packaging manufacturer that makes flexible packaging for frozen food and pet food, well, there's only so many frozen food brands and pet food brands in the world, right? And so how you ought to approach your marketing, or how you ought to think about it, is fundamentally different from a world where lately everybody that talks about marketing is talking about the funnel. And it's been not just even lately, it's been for over a decade now. We've been kind of having this funnel model pushed in front of us, and people are kind of told to do a bunch of tactics to throw leads into the top of funnel, and then they qualify and come down the funnel. And I think it just I think for many marketers, they would be well served to actually take a more account-focused approach and get that funnel model out of their head as they think about marketing, because it leads you to report on the wrong things, choose the wrong tactics, and it leads you down, I think, a lot of wrong paths. Does that make some sense, Anthony?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know exactly. I mean, I just had a few conversations over the last couple of weeks with some clients about similar, problem. Like they're being taught the wrong tactics and strategies that doesn't fit where they're at in their current business, who their client is. And, it's completely, and it's not working for them. Right. Mm-hmm. So, really having those conversations where that matching the tactics and strategies with the actual, where they're at in their business and their actual business model. So.
Yeah, I've been kind of, as I rant about this a little bit, I always I think what's curious to me about it is that the funnel as a framing, as a model, it creates impacts that are much, it's kind of like the old Churchill quote, first we build our buildings and thereafter they build us in some way. And I'm completely messing that quote up, but it was at first we create our buildings and thereafter they shape us, or first we shape our buildings and thereafter they shape us. This notion that the structures that we create, the environments that we create, that we live within, then actually change us in a demonstrable way. Well, that's exactly the same as happened with this notion of the funnel and applying the notion of funnel to marketing and sales. It also, it's interesting, it pulls the sales function typically further down, right? You always think about, when you think of the funnel, you think, well, you have marketing more at the top, and then as leads get qualified and then they become an SQL or what have you, a sales qualified lead, well, then they're engaged with a sales resource and it gets serious. And so much of the buying process has completely has been completed by then. By the time somebody's that far down that funnel, you have a very limited opportunity to actually shape the procurement process or actually frame it in a way that is positive to you and your firm. And sometimes the sales talent that we have in our organizations are some of the best people that at helping to shape that dialogue if they could just get in the door early. So I think we need to think differently about how we engage sales earlier, how sales become more integrated in our marketing efforts so that they can begin to build connectivity and relationships with prospects before there's actually a buying process that's underway. It drives us to a lot of different, more interesting thinking than where the funnel has been leading us.
Yeah, absolutely. And talk to me how visually you would explain, or how you would explain an account-focused model versus a sales funnel model.
Yeah, man, Anthony, the visualization piece is the hardest thing of this, you know. Because we've been kicking this around a bit. Actually, I was just on another podcast, actually guesting on a podcast yesterday, the day before, and we kind of thought we maybe came up with it live on air. So I'll continue down this path and see if it works today. But we were kind of almost equating it more like a beehive in some weird way. Like your marketing universe is that beehive, and you're trying to bring bees into it, right? But there's bees scattering all around outside of it. Some are closer to the hive than others, and you have to find ways to attract them and bring them into your universe. But then I think the reason that we like the hive model a little bit is that once they get into the hive, it doesn't assume that they stay there. They can move in and out. But beyond that, the vision of inside a hive is very complex. You could imagine that there's a lot of rooms in there. There's lots of stuff going on. There's lots of bees in there. It's a lot messier than the which I think is more reflective of modern day marketing reality. There's a lot of buying problems that buyers are trying to solve in a buying process, and we don't always know which problems they're trying to solve at which points in their buying journey. How do we enable that buying process inside that hive, as an example, inside the digital marketing universe that you create? That's a complex job, and I think the mess of inside the hive helps maybe communicate that a little better. Okay. But I don't know if the visual is going to work for me, Anthony, or not.
No worries.
I haven't talked to my creative director to see if he can make this visually make sense yet.
No, I totally get it.
He doesn't want to have that conversation. He's another crazy thing I got to try to do is what he's going to be thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I was referencing talking with these people, and a lot of from the people I talk to, they're not distinguishing the difference between sales activities and their sales focus and their marketing activities and what the expectations of each one of those is, right?
Right.
When we, I always tell them, like, hey, here's how you distinguish it. Marketing is communicating a message to the marketplace. Like you can get a direct response from it, but generally if you're needing to get clients right now, you need to go out and do some sales activities and be engaged in a sales focused aspect. So I think
I think for the small business or smaller business, and I'm a small business. I mean, we're a small agency, 16 people or so. So it's not like we're a massive business, and that's by design. But even the things that you do, you say marketing is about the message. But yes, who's it going to? Who are we trying to get that message in front of? And frankly, for a lot of small businesses, you can decide who that is. Like you can figure out your target client profile. Who would you ideally like to serve? Come up with your top 100 prospects that you would love to have on your client roster. You're a young web design agency, 2 years in, you're not focused on any particular vertical or anything of that nature. You could still actually find, like, maybe you only service in your local community. you can find that target account list, and then you can find ways to get in front of it. So it's almost a bit of a combination of sales-focused targeting, but then enabled by digital marketing these days. I mean, we can grab a target account list, and then we can get in front of them with tools like LinkedIn or what have you in a very quick way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
so without that account focus, we're just, I don't know, we're just writing blog posts hoping to rank for a keyword why? Oh, well, because if we rank for this keyword, it's getting X thousand monthly searches. Yeah, but you service people within a 20-mile geography of your store. You don't need there's no real benefit to getting traffic from California or whatever the scenario might be, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, since you are in this B2B, talk to us about what does it look like when, you're marketing B2B and what does that all look like? Because, a lot of what a lot of digital marketing focuses on, either it's pretty mass in the sense of working on Facebook, right? That's what the majority that I see people deal with. And even I've been in that B2B space of like doing business development for B2B,
Right.
So talk to us about marketing in that. What does that look like? How does that work? Things like that.
Well, I mean, it's a fairly marketing and B2B marketing writ large is a fairly big topic, I suppose. But I don't. I guess at most often, how I'm trying to draw the parallels and differences. This is the way I kind of describe it when it comes to e-commerce, because there's a lot of discussion these days in B2B e-commerce about people having B2C expectations. There's any conference that you go to, there will be at least one person dressed in a black T-shirt like me standing up in front of the crowd talking about B2B, B2C, basically delivering consumer-esque experiences in B2B e-commerce. I think they complicate something that doesn't need to be complicated. I equate it to a car. So if you drove a car to your office today, but let's say that you're a linesman for an electrical utility. So you drive your car to the office. We'll give you a Toyota Corolla. We don't want to make you too rich. And you get to work and you hop in your utility truck that has the bucket to go up the poles and everything, right? These are both vehicles. We fundamentally expect them to operate in the same way. We expect the gas pedal to be on the right and the brake to be on the left, steering wheel, all of the stuff is kind of, we expect to be the same, but these vehicles have very different functions. Well, it's the same in a B2B versus a B2C e-commerce, say, checkout process or buying process, where it's people expect the interface and many of the elements to be very similar and to have, they expect the pedal to be on the right and they expect the steering wheel, but they also know that this is very different functions. So you can't maybe do a checkout with a credit card if you're trying to do B2B e-commerce in a for a $100,000 product. That's not something that's going to be transacted on your American Express. Maybe there's a purchase order that needs to be built out. Maybe there's login requirements and all of that, so that people actually have to buy on account. I mean, but I think we can just think about it through that car analogy, and it just all of the stuff that these barriers, imaginary barriers that we create that separate B2C versus B2B can kind of just start to go away in some ways. Does that help?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, the world of B2B marketing overall is, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on, so it's hard to pick an area to talk about, really.
Yeah, and you talked a little bit about earlier about LinkedIn tactics and how that's kind of skewed, or even just general sales tactics. It's just kind of skewed how we're doing things and kind of doing them wrong.
Well, I thought the funnel was at least pulling us in the wrong direction. I don't know if LinkedIn's pulling us in the wrong direction or doing anything wrong,
but even just the aspect of the tactics, is it, what were you diving into it there? Was it
what I was saying. So, for instance, if you think about the funnel and you're thinking about, okay, well, what are the activities that drive into the top of funnel?
Yeah.
And we say, okay, well, organic search, paid search, there's all these tactics that we can pull, just like we were talking about around, there's lots of different options for getting a marketing message out there. All I'm really trying to say in some ways is let's try to make it more account focused so that we use those tools in smart ways. We find ways to focus our message on the actual people who we know can buy our product when we have a limited opportunity to sell it. And frankly, we should integrate our highly technically competent both sales resources, but maybe people that are beyond in the enablement space, or maybe sit behind sales, technical engineers, or what have you. We shouldn't hide our experts in today's day and age. In 2019, our experts can't be behind a curtain. We need to try to integrate them into our marketing and bring them more up funnel, to use the old funnel terminology.
Okay. So what's your kind of take on chatbots and videos and some other of these shiny objects that might be out there?
Oh man. It makes the web awfully annoying to use, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you get onto a website these days and you've got to click 3 boxes. You got to sign off on the GDPR consent. You get that out of the way, and then you.
I guess that might be the marketer's fault, but that might be somebody else's fault.
That's somebody else's fault, but you get that out of the way. This is the environment you're working in, though, right? Yeah. And so you have to have that. Great. And then you get the newsletter pop up immediately. Well, you dismiss that, and then you get the chat bot pop up, and it's like. I feel like we're creating it's not a user focused decision that's driving that, but now people are getting results with it, though. I mean, I know a number of clients and prospects, people in my general world that have had great success using chatbots as an example. So, I guess, is the juice worth the squeeze? I think you're pissing some people off, but if you're seeing conversions, then it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like with enough tact, it can be done right. But that's one thing that, I've definitely. I remember running the website for the real estate company, and I kind of either delayed it pretty well, that pop up to join the newsletter, or completely shut it off because it was more about user experience and stuff. So,
I think you in creating a digital presence, there are times when you focus on what the user actually wants to do. Then there's times when you focus on what you want the user to do, and there's actually, I don't think there's one right answer. It depends on what part of the digital experience we're creating, where those scales tip, if you will. Yeah.
I mean, from a standpoint of sending out more of like newsletter stuff, we've used it for that, and chat bots and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, it is helpful for that. But I know people try to get into these crazy sequences and follow-ups and all that stuff, and you can't fake human interaction.
It could be. And I think, again, this might be an area where our kind of messaging kind of connects a bit, where I'm saying people focus on the wrong things. That focusing on those bright shining objects and saying, okay, the thing that we need to do in Q1 is get a chatbot enabled on our website. Here we are on a podcast. How long have podcasts been around? This is not new technology, but you can still use it in very business focused and business development focused ways if you want. Like if you want to start a podcast and then go out and start co-creating episodes with your potential prospects and customers, so that you can meet them, and it gives you an excuse to meet them, and it gives you an excuse to then go out and co-create content with them. That's a legit business development strategy that doesn't need any fancy new chat bot or latest thing that's being talked about on Twitter or whatever that people are on about these days. You know what I mean? I think sometimes we just focus on those shiny objects. Man, video has been a shiny object for so long, it doesn't even know how to be anything else, I think, sometimes. But
yeah, and then I've seen, and people are terrible with these automated messengers with LinkedIn, and they're one guy I know, he intentionally left his middle initial and his first name to see if it was a chatbot or not.
Oh, okay.
Because it'll copy, his middle initial, and then it'll be so-and-so middle initial, comma, and they'll be like, oh, it's a chatbot. He completely knows it is. It's not real human.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, but these technologies are getting better too. It's interesting, like for instance, the amount of news articles that we consume in the run of a day or week that are actually not written by humans. Natural language generator platforms at many that basically scrape information and compile articles. So much of our news is that now, and nobody really knows that other than journalists who are.
And what was that called?
Your job. Well, they use natural language generator platforms to do it. There's a bunch of, it would be good for me to remember the damn brand names now of some of these tools, but it escapes me. But you can find them. Just search Google for natural language software. I'll send you an email. Perhaps you can put it with the show notes after or something.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to look that up. I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. So I mean, they're doing it. They're making it so that you're reading news articles every week that you think were written by a human that were not. So now that's not getting the ebb and flow of interaction and that immediate context translation like you would kind of need in like you say in an automated chatbot scenario or whatever to make it really feel like it was human. But the technology is going in one direction, I guess. So you have to believe it'll eventually get there.
Got it. So what about with what are some other big mistakes you feel finding marketers are pulling off and missing the boat on?
Yeah, I think there are a bunch. I mean, most people do a really terrible job of with the. Well, I guess it's very easy for us to tear apart a website in about 3 seconds. Almost any website. It's amazing how information architectures are not particularly focused on users. They're not particularly focused on conversion, and they have no search considerations at all. It's amazing how many websites in this day and age you still pull up and you look at the code underneath of them, and there's no H1 set. There's no there's just no proper on-page SEO that's been done at all. This is stuff that's been around for 20 years now, guys. Like, we know how to do this to make these things. Like, you created a website, you're creating a needle in the largest haystack ever invented. Give it a chance to be found. And then so often now too, you see, it's very hard to find websites that are actually passing accessibility tests these days. It's amazing the percentage of sites that are inaccessible. So you have businesses out there who have a website that can't be used by a blind person. I mean, that's the same as them not having a wheelchair ramp accessibility into their store or something, right?
Yeah.
But they never think of it that way. And I mean, Domino's was in the news recently. They just had a massive lawsuit loss on an accessibility, because the Americans with Disabilities Act essentially is the framework that enables the lawsuits around inaccessible websites. And Domino's just paid a huge price.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, like millions of dollars. So stuff with real consequences for real businesses that and if they frankly just built the web using current best practice, like WCAG accessibility standards, just stuff that's been around forever, they would not be in the mess. Yeah.
Huh.
So
Yeah,
stop focusing on the chat bot maybe and start doing some of the old school stuff right first,
I know you can't have you need a deeper a more secure foundation.
Yeah.
These cracks in your foundation, and doesn't matter what how tall, you're going to try to build your building tall, it's going to fall. No matter how much shiny glass you put on the outside either. So
yeah. And another, I would say, challenge or issue that I see with many marketers is that they get, because our results in a digital world can oftentimes be more immediately seen. They almost begin to frame the potential ROI of their marketing efforts and think about what they're trying to do in a way. They allow them to be tugged into too short-term a focus, I think is the way to say it. So you have a lot of times where the marketers will say, well, we're only getting a small budget to do this now, but if it shows some success, then we can throw more money into it and we'll double down. Well, some parts of marketing can work like that, and other parts can't. And I think marketers would be well served to look back and say, okay, where we're trying to take this business in 3 years' time? What's the increase in year-over-year growth that we're looking to accomplish here? What does that actually translate into contribution margin that comes back to the business? And as a result of that, let's reverse engineer our budgets and take a longer view of, okay, well, we're trying to, our potential gain, as an example, like, I was working with a business recently and we're kind of shaping up their growth goals. And they're about $120 million business today, and growing at about 10% year over year. So you can, if they want to double that growth rate, well, it's going to take something to do that. It's not going to take just one thing. It's going to take a lot of things. But the doubling of that, we know what, you can work out what the math of that is, right? Yeah. And you can work out if they have a 40% contribution margin, you know what exactly their the profit contribution is, or the gross contribution is for that. So you can then extrapolate what the marketing budget ought to be. If marketers would do a little bit of that math up front, they might find themselves with a lot more budget in their pockets. And then they ought to be executing on that budget in a way that is iterative and disciplined and improves upon itself. That's the place for that. But you got to think a little bit bigger first. And I think it's a combination of business owners or CEOs that aren't particularly marketing savvy, putting demands on their marketing team to be more ROI driven in a short-term sense, and it sometimes leads them down a wrong focus. And other times I think it's just the world of digital leads us to think this way.
Yeah. And with a B2B strategy, like talk to me about like what paid strategies is it, Google ads, what does that look like? And since you're dealing with, a relatively small to medium sized business marketing to larger businesses, what does that look like?
You mean for me personally or for in the world of B2B?
Yeah. In the world of B2B with paid strategies. Digitally.
What does it look like in terms of the changes or the differences from B2C?
Yeah, like what's the differences? Like what are the platforms you guys are using?
Yeah. You would find paid search, is still can for many clients works really well. I mean, it's not that different than a B2C space. It's just the search terms that you're buying and what you're hoping to accomplish with them are different. It probably puts more of a focus on LinkedIn, somewhat predictably, less of a focus on Facebook, but not a complete elimination of Facebook. It's interesting. You can still surround targets in that world, and but it's typically more, you're kind of doing a bit of a redirect. It's so I'd say less reliance on Facebook generally, obviously much more on LinkedIn. Paid search is generally, it works well, both consumer and B2B, pretty widely. I would say in B2B scenarios, you probably see Bing coming into play a little bit more because, corporates with button down PC-based technology may be forcing people to use a Bing browser. So you oddly find yourself getting some pretty good ROI on Bing ads that, sometimes on the consumer space, you just won't get any traffic at all.
Oh, it's interesting. Very interesting.
I would say anybody that's running paid search and they're only doing it in Google, I mean, you can bring that profile over into Bing with a couple of clicks, and the traffic, you won't get as much traffic on Bing, but you'll pay less for it on a per-click basis, usually about half.
You're covering your basis of being more omnipresent,
Yeah.
on all these different things, different platforms.
Well, and you've already made the decision that you're willing to pay X amount for a click to whatever destination you're driving to. So if you can pay a fraction of that over on another platform, who cares? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if, even if you have to go up to that, it's still more of that source. And with your creative and strategies, it's more branding focused, or is it, are you trying to get them to, book, sales calls or anything like that? Or how is that? Because, I mean, we talked about the funnel, right? And when people think of the funnel, there's strategies around branding, and there's no real direct response. Then there's, obviously, downloads, white papers, things like that. What do you?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we see a mix of both promotion of assets or using a tool like LinkedIn or even Google Ads to surround a trade show attendees and things of that sort. So there, you maybe simply be promoting a brand and where your booth is going to be. So like as an example, if you're attending a trade show as you're exhibiting at a trade show, well, if you know the your target prospects that are going to be at that show or likely to be at that show, then you can advertise to them in advance about what your presence is going to be. You can also do proximity targeting around the trade show itself, so that people that are in town and on their phones, going out to dinner, doing whatever in the course of actually attending the trade show, may be seeing your ads because they're targeted to people within a kilometer or a mile radius of the particular trade show destination. So there's lots of things that you could promote there that isn't a conversion asset. Otherwise, more often than not, we'd be looking to promote a conversion asset so that we can turn a nameless, faceless prospect into a lead at some point.
Awesome. So some of it does transfer over and with B2B and B2C.
Absolutely. I would say in B2B even more so than B2C, although this works in both. Driving to an interactive conversion asset is always better, almost always better. Like we have found across our portfolio of clients for a decade that like interactive calculators, diagnostic tools, things of that sort, those kinds of assets will always convert at about double the rate of a white paper or something like that. Now, there are exceptions to that rule, but they are exceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing I've had on the back burner for a year of just doing what I call a battle ready assessment. Like, is your business ready? So,
right. I think, it's amazing the conversion lifts I've seen in creating that, and how much buyer intel in some complex sales cycles you can get. We had one. We did this tool that helped identify the appropriate wireless telephone and internet service for your small business. So we did this for a telco, and So their campaign is focused on small business, driving people to this landing page. They sign up, they convert, and go through I think it was like 6-screen kind of question and answer. Maybe it was only 3. I don't remember now. But it asks them, how many employees do they have? Lots of really important business intel and information on every screen. And every time that they would submit to go to the next screen, we were grabbing the information out of that form and sending it to the profile that that was just created on HubSpot, so that you're beginning to populate their customer profile in the CRM. HubSpot was connected over to Salesforce, so it's pumped there too. The only problem that the sales team had with this is that most often, by the time that they got this lead at the end of that, and actually ended up calling them to try to sell into that small business, they had actually already called up the telco directly and just transacted over the phone. So the conversions just happen so fast. Yeah, It's pretty fascinating.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, awesome. So let's talk a little bit about you. It looks like you're the company's barista.
I'm just having to plug some power in here. Just hold on a second. Hopefully that'll work and keep us from shutting down. There we go. So we have a pretty serious espresso machine here, and I'm happy to perform any latte works of art that need to be done, I guess, in the course of a day, either for staff or for clients, as the case might be. A weird indulgence, but we like it.
So are you a coffee connoisseur or espresso connoisseur?
I mostly only drink espresso, but I don't. I have a wide appreciation for altering substances, and I would say coffee is right up there. So any way you can get caffeine intake, I'm interested to hear about it. But mostly it's espresso.
So yesterday I went to this co-working space, and I was like, got a quad shot, and I was like, it came out and it was like a sour taste, like a sour espresso. And I don't know what that makes it and why they think it. I didn't appreciate it, but like, talk to us about that. Like, do you know?
It's funny. The preferences around coffee. I find the flavor profiles in cafes to be a very regional thing.
Yeah.
Like your espresso is going to taste a lot different in Portland, Oregon than it does here in Halifax.
Even if it's the same bean?
No, what I'm saying is that the beans that are popular in those areas and the taste profiles that emerge are just very different. That's what I found. We used an unwashed Ethiopian espresso bean.
And what does that come out as? Like, how can you describe that?
I think it has kind of a minimal, kind of a bit of a light bit of brightness to it, and it's otherwise kind of nicely earthy. Would be how I would describe the taste.
Yeah.
We've been running that as our standard espresso for, I think now like 6 years.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or 7. Yeah, I don't know. It's roasted locally by a great little company called Java Blend. So they've kind of started the whole coffee scene here on the East Coast of Canada back in the 70s, I believe.
Nice.
So it's kind of weird. We, I would say in Canada, only very recently could you get a decent espresso in places like Toronto. They were kind of catching up a little bit. I think we were almost a little bit ahead, but now everybody in Toronto is mad at me for that.
Very cool. Well, I appreciate having you on, and I appreciate your insights and stuff. So
I don't know if the coffee will be helpful to the listeners, but we'll see.
So how can people get a hold of you?
The best place to find me is just go to Kula Partners, KULAPartners.com, and you can find out all about the business and find me and the rest of the team there as well. And I'm pretty easy to get a hold of. thing about having a name like Carman Pirie is that there's nobody else in the world with that name, so you're one Google search away from being found.
I'm going to change one of my kids' names. I'm just kidding. So, all right, challenge somebody to do it. No.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Appreciate you having you on, and we'll talk soon.
Anthony, it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right.
This concludes another episode of the Be Battle Ready podcast. If you're looking to put it all together across all the areas of your life and be battle ready, come get connected with powerful leaders in our Be Battle Ready Facebook group, where we will be dropping new battles to win each day.